Securities offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through CWM, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC is under separate ownership from any other named entity. Carson Partners, a division of CWM, LLC, is a nationwide partnership of advisors. This is The Way to Wealth, with host Scott Ford, a jiu-jitsu fighting, woodworking, beekeeping entrepreneur who is also the managing director, partner, and wealth advisor of Carson Wealth. Financial freedom is the goal, and clarity and simplicity is how we'll get there. Let's get to it. This is Way to Wealth.
And welcome back to the Way to Wealth podcast, where we're all about making money simple, allowing you the freedom to live life and to live it fully now. Super excited this week. I have Jonathan Mullins with us. Welcome to the Way to Wealth podcast, Jonathan.
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. Looking forward to our conversation. Totally.
Well, I always like to start with, who you are and such. One of the things I'll say is Jonathan, who I from now on will call Cub, because that's what I call him. And you can maybe even share that story. Cub has been in the industry 13 years, been with the firm 9 years, certified financial planner, super smart, capable advisor. And yeah, excited to have you on. And those of you not watching on video, as Cub tells the story, well, Cub's a pretty good guy. It's kind of like a refrigerator having a head on, like a defensive lineman or offensive lineman, really big guy. Actually, we first met, I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And I think Cub's comment was, hey, man, look, don't I'm going to stay in your good graces. Don't choke me or anything. I'm like, Cub, this is impossible. All you got to do is get those mitts on me and the game's over. So anyway, welcome to the Way to Wealth podcast, Cub. And I'd love to, for you to share your backstory, just, what got you here today, and maybe even the story of Jonathan to Cub.
Sure. Glad to do that. Thanks. I started in the industry about 13 years ago with another firm and worked for a bank at some point along the way. But, what really perked my interest in financial planning was growing up with a single mom. It was just me and her. And if it hadn't been for my grandparents, life would have been pretty difficult. She was able to put away some money with an advisor with one of the more national known brands or national known broker dealers that will remain unnamed. But, that was really her first opportunity to become an investor. And I didn't understand it at the time. I didn't know anything about it. I just went to school and was fortunate enough to have good grades and worked hard. I didn't have a choice on the working hard matter, because my mother likes to tell the story a lot of times that I forgot what appliance or whatever it was that wasn't working one day. And she unplugs it from the wall, walks over to the door, throws it out in the yard. And I just said, what are you doing? And she said, whatever's in this house, if it doesn't work, it doesn't stay. And I thought, there's something to that. And I guess that stuck with me somehow. But I had an opportunity to go to college and play football. And that certainly made it more financially available for me to get an education, and very thankful for those opportunities. And, wasn't sure what direction to go afterwards, and was talking with her. And she was like, well, maybe this is something you should try. And I worked at a bank in college for a few years and thought about going in that direction, and ultimately ended up here. And at the end of the day, it's one of those things. If you're helping people, then whatever you do, whatever profession you're in, it's something you can hold your head up high and feel good about. And that's something we do every day here. So it's exciting, and every day is a little bit different. Some days are a little more conventional than others, but still it's great. It's a great experience.
And I like the line, whatever's in this house that doesn't work has got to go. So that left an indelible mark, obviously.
So far, so good. It's, she's still working now. She's got a couple more years, and we're working on the plan for her to give it up and spend more time as a grandmother. I've got a little boy. He'll turn 6 here in about a month. And, it's life is good. Life is good.
Yeah. And yeah, the story of Jonathan the Cub. I know you've shared it with me, but since I teed that up, and by the way, the refrigerator with the head on, I mean, that's a compliment. That's again, offensive, defensive lineman. I can remember being at the airport, taking a trip, and this was out of Reagan, and standing in line, and I'm behind a guy, and this guy, I'm like, there was just no questions. This guy was a professional football player. And I'm thinking, how is he getting on this plane? He did, but anyway, you can see a lineman in professional football or college football, they stand out. So Cub, yeah, that's a compliment.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Scott. I've never been more envious of you than whenever I fly a coach. I just think, man, I really wish, and I hate it for whoever has to ride in the middle seat. That's the hardest part. Whoever the middle seat person is, bless their heart. It's difficult on them. I try to go for the aisle because, hey, I'll take a cart banging into my knee or my elbow a couple times a flight just to have a little extra room on occasion. But anyway, it's worth it. It's 100% worth it. No, I went to college. I was a all-state athlete in high school, and I went to a smaller school. It was a Division II school in Virginia, and I thought, I'm just playing offense. This won't be that bad. I'm not playing offense and defense and special teams like I did in high school. So I'll just practice and train like I would normally, and it'll be okay. Little did I know that when you go up a level, you also have a higher expectation and a higher level of athletes that you're going up against on a regular basis. So long story short, I am finishing a drill during summer camp. We had 3-a-day practices plus a workout then. This was before the NCAA came through and mandated it to be twice a day. And I guess, I don't know if they serve lemonade during practice now. I don't know. But anyway, that we were out there working hard the whole time. And I crawled through a drill to get finished. And one of the coaches, as I'm on the ground sucking air, trying to live, says, you're rolling around on the ground like a little cub bear, and it stuck. So of all of the things that they could have said and that they could have compared me to, I feel like Cub was a pretty good, a pretty good one. It could have been way worse. So
I get it, and seems fitting. And clearly the way he said that, it was nothing but love and good intentions with how he expressed it.
I learned a valuable lesson that time, though, Scott, because it was one of those where, it's working hard. Expectations change over time. They get to be more and more and more, and you just got to rise to the occasion. And luckily, at the end of the term, before I graduated, we went from a 3-8 team to an 8-3 team, and I got to be one of the All-Americans on the team. So it worked out really well.
Nice. Yeah. And that's one of the benefits of sports, man, is it teaches you stuff like that, to work as a team and to overcome challenges and be resilient. So well done, man. And you shared a little bit of this. I always like to ask what's important. The podcast is about making money simple. That's what we're about. And I always like to ask what's important about making money simple to you. I've certainly shared my backstory there. You've touched on it. You said single mom and grandparents helped out. And so I'm sure that's a piece of why you're passionate about helping people and making money simple.
Right. I know with your story, and a lot of times it really sort of relates to mine too. And I think a lot of people's stories, I think that's why it really resonates well, that if you're not in a profession, it's hard to know. I guess I'll say it like this. If you're not in a profession, you may not know the simplicity of that profession because you're ignorant of it. It's foreign. It's not something that comes through any training or education or any experience. So I think there are a lot of people that are out there that, feel like that discussions about wealth management and financial planning and things of that nature are for the people who have money. Whereas, really and truly, it's about people who are just working and trying to make a better life for themselves. If you've got, and this is something that may be akin to you. I see this in my practice a lot, that sometimes the people who have the most abundance of wealth are the ones that really don't have as high of a risk tolerance than the other people, because they're like, I've already earned all this money, or I already have all these assets. I just want to try to protect them and make sure that they don't go away. And
Yeah.
the people who are still trying to figure that out, feel a little bit differently about it. So really, it's about trying to make sure we tear down some of those walls, and we tear down some of those, misnomers and so forth about how to put yourself in a good position and why you need to do certain things. And ultimately, I tell my wife this, that at work, I get to tell people what to do, and most of the time they listen. And what it would be like if that happened at home.
Good luck with that. Good luck with that. And so, speaking of making money simple, I mean, that's the benefit of it. And look, I think we all would agree that the industry is a bit conflicted. I think it makes it complicated on purpose, and in some ways can take advantage of that situation. So for us on the Way to Wealth podcast, clearly it's about the way to wealth. And that's our process. The way living now, the two's the team, then wealth is an acronym of what's the foundation and those 6 pieces that put the bricks in the foundation. And then on that, which we went through and will continue through the years, on top of that foundation is the EAL in wealth. And the E is established savings. The A is all expenses covered by income. And the L is living with inflation. So that's the 3-bucket approach. Like when you have that foundation, then you have savings, you have income, and you have growth, monies in 3 different buckets. And one of the things I think our industry gets wrong is they cost savings investing, and it's not. So you may be putting money in your 401k, and people are like, yeah, I'm saving as much as I can up to the match in the 401k, and I'm maxing it out. That is great. But that's not savings, that's investing. And it's good, meaning investing is good. It's just that savings is like money that's not at risk, immediately accessible. It's liquid, it's available. So today, I know we had slotted to talk about what's this growth bucket about. And again, I just wanted to reiterate, foundation first, bucket 1, savings, make sure you have a minimum of a year. Bucket 2, income, ideally all expenses covered by income at least 10. Then the growth bucket, we can swing for the fences. So what's important about that growth bucket to you?
Right. Great question. And really, it's all about the future, because, when we do the plan, when we design plans, we've got the savings. That's okay, if anything happens in the short term, I got it. And we've got the income, which is, I know I'm going to need more money next year, and we got it. And now it's at some point in the future, we're probably going to have to deal with higher prices. Now, that doesn't happen today at all. We never see prices any different today than we saw maybe pre-pandemic. I mean, if you go to try to buy any lumber, if you go to buy any, provisions or any meats or anything at the grocery store, you're not going to see a difference in prices from today versus 2 years ago. I've got a good friend he's an avid duck hunter, and he hunts all types of wildlife. And most of the meals that he makes are animals and wild game, things that he's actually harvested himself. And I remember we were talking about this very subject a few weeks ago, and he said, I don't really notice people complain about the groceries a whole lot, and I don't see a problem with it. And I said, well, tell me a little bit there. Friend, what when you were buying 3-inch Magnum duck shells from insert whatever store you're buying them from, when you first started hunting, how much were they per shell? And he's like, oh man, I only shoot the best. I shoot the bismuth loads, and right now, they're almost $4 a shell. And I go, yeah, it costs you $4 every time you shoot that duck, not counting what you have to pay the state for licensing to be able to do it legally, and the gear that you're wearing, because my God, you're a hunter, I'm a hunter. The gear, and actually, he has a few sit.
Not free.
No, and some of it is like designing a kitchen or a bathroom. You can make it as expensive as you want, and he's like, I kind of see where you're coming from. It was a lot less expensive years ago than what it is right now. And you can think about that on a lot of different areas. Supply and demand, just if you want to buy a new vehicle or anything right now, or even a used vehicle, it's random that how supply chain, especially the global supply chain, can change prices that we as consumers really have no control in. So one of the biggest questions is, how do you live with inflation? And ultimately, the best way to do this that we've found is to make sure you have that segmented section of assets positioned to own businesses that are able to help control a little bit more of the profitability. Everyone needs to operate at a profit. And it doesn't mean that people need to, or corporations or whoever need to make money hand over fist, but they need to be profitable, because if they're not profitable, they're not going to be around. So one of the benefits for us when we're designing plans and when we talk to clients and we talk to people in the public about how to make sure your money doesn't lose value is that, you have that proper segmentation. We've got the savings, we've got the income that's taking care of the short and the intermediate term, but the long-term money really needs to be, in a diversified strategy that owns a lot of different businesses that are charging higher prices right now and having continued profitability and that are looking good for the future. Because if you don't do that, if they're not making money, one, we're not going to be able to buy products and services, because if no one in that industry is able to make a profit, then there's no businesses that are going to be had. The greatest way to protect and grow wealth in America or any capitalist society is owning businesses. So when you are a stock owner, when you're an equity owner, or even going for on the alternative side of things, if you're owning hard assets or what have you, those are ways that you can protect your dollar over the long term. That doesn't mean that it won't fluctuate in the short term. But the reason that when we design these plans, we tell people, don't worry about that, because we've got our savings and we've got our income structured so that your money that you're spending today and in next week and next year and the next, handful plus years is already protected, is already taken care of. So the money that's in the long term, that really needs to ride that wave, because over time we have seen that wave generally grows, even though there are sometimes it wanes, but the majority of the time it grows.
Yeah, it's why we do it. Very well said. Yeah, I mean, that's the idea of doing this on a one-page plan with Weight of Wealth and setting up 3 buckets is when and if you hit a pandemic, you hit a catastrophe, you hit a big market correction, there's peace of mind with having savings, having the income taken care of. And we know this is 10 plus year money at a minimum, sometimes more. So you can ride these things out. And, your point on why stocks can make sense is spot on. I like to use the analogy, and you gave a couple with groceries and your buddy who hunts is exactly right. What about gas? We all need fuel. What's happened with those prices? So I'll hear people going, my gosh, have you seen the gas and fuel prices? Like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to afford it. Well, what happens is 2 things, I think. And one is retirees, they don't have that income coming in, which is why the buckets make so much sense to limit that risk of not having that income coming in. And they're like, look, I'm on this fixed income now, and how can I keep up with this? So you get in your mind scarcity, where like, I gotta scrimp and save, and I better be careful. And here's the thing, who really has control of those gas prices to a degree, or at least who's profiting, let's put it this way, from those higher gas prices? So can you control those prices going up? I'm going to argue you cannot. Well, then what should you do? You got to pay for the fuel if you're going to use it and travel around. Your other option is invest in the company who's profiting with those higher gas prices. That's owning equities. And so that's how, and that's what you mentioned, that's how you can combat and keep up with inflation, is owning the companies that can profit from that inflation. So, what should people be thinking about? You mentioned a diversified portfolio, having stocks in the portfolio. Some of the things that come to mind to me as well are hard assets like real estate and other hard assets that can benefit, land that can benefit from rising inflation, and things of that nature. And for some people, it's businesses. I mean, you could buy a business or start a business and be able to keep up with inflation that way. Any other thoughts on things people should be thinking about with inflation or ways that they can combat it?
Right. The other thing we hadn't touched on that I think is super important is talking about the ownership and how these assets are titled and whether or not they're actually yours or whether or not you have to share them with the government. I don't want to say it too loud because they could be listening. But no, it's fine. Hey, you know what? I like driving on paved roads. So good job, government. Now, whether or not we could get into a debate on, how much it should cost to pave that road versus what they pay for it is a whole nother discussion here. But yeah, I mean, we think about, tax management, tax planning. And I know going through the CFP program, taxes are one of those topics that cover so many subject areas. And, when we think about our growth bucket, we really like to see tax-free assets. We don't want to see something that, right now, the rule may be that, 85% of your retirement account is probably going to be yours based on what you're going to take from it every year because the government's going to get maybe 15%, maybe 20, maybe 25, whatever that number may be. The point being is that number is subject to change based on what lawmakers decide to do in the future. Again, the control factor. Do we have any control over what they're going to do? No. It'd be really cool if we did, but unfortunately we don't. So what we can do is plan for these things along the way. So should we keep more assets that are growth oriented in, say, taxable accounts or in tax-free accounts, Roth accounts, either 401ks or IRAs or what have you, anything on the tax-free side? Should we use other types of assets? Life insurance would be an example. Is that something that would make sense in the growth bucket? Well, maybe, it's something we can talk through to see, but ultimately, the biggest thing that we see to have an impact when we share it with people is to say that, look, your growth account here did fantastic this year. You're up, 15, 20%, whatever, insert whatever number is that you're happy with, you're satisfied with. Okay. It's up that much. Great. How much of that is yours? Have you thought about that? Because really, if the government is going to get a good portion of that money, your numbers may have made that much money, but you got to share a part of that profit with Uncle Sam or Uncle whatever state you live in there too. So all of these things matter. It's all about, at the end of the day, how much money are you able to put in your pocket? Are you able to go and buy gifts for relatives, for children, for spouses, grandchildren, whatever. So a lot of it is making it's one thing, keeping it is a whole nother.
Yeah. Well said. And, I think about our debt, and I'll wrap things up with this. I think about our debt, our national debt, and two things come to mind, and you touched on one. So we're talking about inflation. So with this national debt, that's what you keep hearing. What's going to happen with inflation? Number one. Number two, what's going to happen with taxation because of the debt that needs paid back? So great points to me. I'm thinking taxes do tie to inflation and things you need to be thinking about. And so there's ways to navigate it. It's ways to keep up with inflation. We've shared some, and just an overarching approach that can keep you in the game and can keep emotions out. That's what Way to Wealth is designed for. So as we look to wrap up, Cub, any closing remarks or thoughts that you would want to share with the audience on really the Way to Wealth, wealth management planning, or inflation in general?
Sure. I think to kind of summarize everything, when you step back and look at the big picture, it is complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. When we meet with people and we explain the Way to Wealth and doing it right, making sure you've got the solid foundation, making sure that we're establishing the different buckets with your savings, income, and growth, that a lot of those, when you look at it all at once, it can be overwhelming. And we explain to people that we take through this process that this takes time. If you're going to eat a whale, The best thing you can do is get a plate full of whale meat, come back, finish it, and then go get another plate full. So you just do it over and over again until you've amassed enough to where it's gone. You've whittled it away. So the thing about it is to keep it simple. When you tackle one specific item at a time, there's simplicity in that. It's not as much of a problem at that point, like building a house. I know a lot of people have probably built a house at some point or another, or had a contractor do it for them or whatnot. You go and you check progress the whole time because it's like, oh gosh, this is so much for me to have to deal with. Well, you got to segment that. You got to take your time, fix as much as you can in this area today as possible. Then let's work on, if we got to work on it tomorrow, we'll go back and work on it tomorrow. If we need to revisit it over time. That's the other thing about having a relationship with a great advisory group. I mean, it's so important to make sure you've got that relationship to where that if there's something you're not really certain about, hey, you can pick up the phone or you can send an email and say, hey, there was a thing we talked about at our last meeting. And the more I think about it, the more, could you give me some clarification on what that means? If you're working with the right people, they're going to say, sure, absolutely. because we get excited for people who get excited about putting themselves in a good position. And that's something that means a lot to all of us here. So I would say that in closing, it is a complicated world. We're here to make things as simple as possible. And the way we do that is to tackle one thing at a time. And over enough time, you solve all the problems that you've got. But guess what? Once you solve those problems, you usually have more problems.
So we're taking a chunk at a time. So that is the premise. Thanks for joining us on the Way to Wealth, Cub. Enjoyed it. Certainly going to have you back. And thank you, audience, for listening in, and clients for having trust in us. We can't wait to see you next week on the Way to Wealth podcast, where we're all about making money simple, allowing you the freedom to focus on living life and doing that now. Catch you next week. Thanks again, Cub.
The opinions voiced in Way to Wealth with Scott Ford, Managing Director, Partner, and Wealth Advisor of Carson Wealth, are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial, or tax advisor prior to investing. Guests on Way to Wealth are not affiliated with CWM LLC or Cetera Advisor Networks LLC. Carson Wealth, 19833 Leitersburg Pike, Suite 1, Hagerstown, Maryland, 21742.